This conference is brought to you by CallStack, a total software engineering consultancy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abramov. I work at Bluesky. And at Bluesky, we're building two different things. So one of the things that we're building is a consumer social media app that might remind you of Twitter. And the other thing that we're building is a new internet protocol. And so if you're like me, the idea of building a new internet protocol might sound a bit weird. Like the protocols I'm familiar with are HTTP, FTP. Haven't really heard of a lot of newer ones since then. So it might sound like when I joined Bluesky, I didn't really understand the protocol part. But this is the talk about the protocol, but I want to talk about the product first, because that's the part that I did understand. And so the way to think about Bluesky, the product, is I kind of think of it as an open source Twitter. So our front end is open source. It's built with Expo. Big thanks to everyone at Expo who made it possible. The first version of the app was actually built by a single person, 3 platforms, 4 months. So yeah, thanks to React Native and Expo. But you can think of it like our front end is open source. Our back end is also open source. So we're still catching up on features. We're about to add video, hopefully next week, maybe, if the release goes through the App Store. But it also has some differences from Twitter that I think are kind of caught my attention initially, and were part of the reason why I got interested in this company and this product. And so one of the first things you're going to notice if you join Bluesky is that the username that you get, like if you sign up with your username, you get your username.bsky.social, which means that our usernames are actually just domains. And so this is a bit weird, but it's kind of interesting that you can always swap it out to a domain you own. So for example, my colleague Haley, she owns haleyok.com, so she just swapped it out to be her username. And then I also wanted to cool username, so I just bought danabra.mov, because you can have .mov domains now. But aside from like the cute factor, it also has some interesting kind of properties where if you see an account that's at WashingtonPost.com, you know that it's actually Washington Post because that's who owns the Washington Post domain. Or if you see an account ending with .senate.gov, you know that this is US government senator. So that was like the first thing that seemed a bit weird to me. Like usually when you sign up for a social website, you have to pick a username, but this kind of feels like the internet itself is like your username. Another interesting thing about Bluesky is that like on Twitter, you have these tabs like For You and Following. That is kind of like the built-in algorithms. But the strange thing about Bluesky is you can actually write your own algorithm and plug it into the app. So you can run your own server, like whenever you like, and you can just serve posts from Bluesky, and then you can add that feed to your profile, and then other people can add it to their homepage. So for example, this is a feed called Quiet Posters that is run by my friend, and it shows content from people that I follow who don't post very often. And so this is like an algorithmic feed that's not built into the app, but that's possible to kind of add as a third-party thing. And so these are kind of unusual features for a social product, like this kind of relying on domains as a way to sign in, or relying on kind of being able to extend the social product with third-party code in a way that really feels cohesive with the app. And the protocol is really, we call it the app protocol. That's really what makes it possible. And so as I kind of did more product development at Bluesky and also just started understanding the protocol side a bit more, I got progressively more excited about it because it started making sense to me. And so I really wanted to, that's kind of how I wanted to do this talk. about, like I think this is kind of like a talk about a few things. It's about the relationship that users have with products and with their data, and also just about the shape of the web and what's kind of interesting about how the web is built. Yeah, so let's talk about the web. How do you put stuff on the web? Um, right, like there's kind of a very immediate connection where I can write some HTML, and that HTML is written by me. I made it, and I want to put it out there. So how do I do that? Well, if I have a pile of HTML, I just need to put it into a box, right? So I just need to find some computer that's going to host this HTML. I can ask my internet service provider to give me a static IP, and then I can like literally serve it from my home, unless my laptop dies. Or I can use a hosting provider that's like either free or paid. But as long as there is some box that contains these files and it can serve them, I can put it on the web. Another thing that I need to put something on the web is a domain. So I need some way for people to refer to, to my content so that they can find it. And so maybe I can use a free domain, like GitHub can give me, or maybe I can later buy my own domain. And so with this kind of web model, it's in a way it's very permissionless, right? Like I can just put stuff out there, tell somebody what the address is, and they can find it. And there is a very clear relationship between me, the creator of that content, and that content. And so what I mean by this is like I'm in control of the entire stack. So if I don't like my domain, I can change my domain. I can point that domain to this machine, and then people who know me, they know that this is my domain, and so they can visit my website and they know that it's actually made by me. And also, like, if my hosting provider, goes down, or like, if I'm not happy with it, or if they start messing with my files, I can just copy and paste them to a different box, right? I can serve them from a different hosting provider. I can change the DNS record to point to the hosting provider, and then again, like, I'm fully in control of what I put on the web and kind of how it's presented. And so, I can change the stuff over time. I can delete some stuff. That's just, how the web works. It's mutable. So I can delete things. I can edit things. I can add new things. And when you visit my site, you still know that, this is all the stuff that I put there. And so this is kind of like the traditional model of web development, where we just put some stuff on the web. It's ours, and we can visit each other's sites. And I mentioned that we have to find some boxes where the stuff lives, but really the boxes are not important from the user perspective. And so the reason is that, for all we know, like my website and Haley's website could have actually been hosted on the same machine, or they could be hosted on different machines. It really doesn't matter from the user perspective, because really as a user, all you see are these HTML files that can link to each other. And so, if you know how to find my site, you know how to find my site. And so one of the things that, if you've been on the internet for long enough, you might remember in the early internet, there was this concept of guest books. Like, you could go to somebody's website, and there would be like a section where you could say like, "Hey there," and kind of leave a comment. And like, Haley could visit my website, and like I could visit Haley's website. And that is like one mode of social interaction on early web that was fairly popular. But again, like people, we don't just want to put stuff on the internet for ourselves. We want to be with other people. And so we want to be in shared social spaces, right? And I mean, like, we can visiting each other's site is kind of like going to somebody's home. But a lot of social interaction actually happens in shared spaces, just like we are in a shared space today. And so shared spaces, they tend to have some kind of social rules. If you don't follow those rules, you will get kicked out. They have some kind of shared context around them. And we can hang out in them together. And so naturally, there was a lot of desire to also have this kind of social interaction on the web. And so in order to feed that into the web model, again, well, you have to find a box where this stuff should live. And the box, it has some kind of domain, like whoever administers this box, whichever brand it has. And so this kind of led to the rise of social networks like Facebook. And maybe there are some other kinds of boxes like Twitter with a slightly different format. But one thing that is kind of interesting here is now we are inside the boxes. Like remember, we used to be outside the box, and we just put some stuff out there and it linked to each other. And now we are in the box. And it may sound like some kind of idealistic distinction about like owning your data and like, that is such a nebulous concept. Like, what does it mean exactly? But I think there's actually like a really kind of practical consequences of that. So one consequence is that if a product goes away, disappears, dies, I mean, it's unlikely to happen with Facebook, but if you've been on the internet for a couple of years, you must have had this situation where you invested a bunch of time into some product, into like, creating some data for that thing, and then it just shut down. So that's kind of sad, And the other thing that can happen is that products can change. They can change their direction. They can change their business model. They can change a lot of things, and you might agree with some of them. You might disagree with some other changes, but you really don't have a lot of say in what happens because you're inside the box. And European Union says that like you should be able to vote with your feet, you should be able to take your data with you. There's like a law that says that websites should offer the expert data. And actually, I had to do this once because so this is my second Twitter account. I used to have Dan Abramov, and then that account just got shadow banned. And I didn't even know, like I didn't think shadow banning was like a real thing. It turns out that it is. My tweets just stopped showing up in the For You algorithmic feed, and that's the only feed that you have on Twitter. So there isn't really much kind of flexibility to experiment with what's going on there. And so I made a second account, and then I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to delete the first one. So I decided to export all my data from the first account just so I have it for memories. And so it took a few days, actually, but then Twitter emailed me this archive of 100 megabytes of JSON of my tweets. But the thing is, it's dead data, right? It's completely torn out of its context. Like, what do I do with it? Like, do I print it on the wall? Do I hand it to friends? Do I make a kind of RIP website for my Twitter presence? This data is dead. And so the question is, who killed it? Is this person in the room with us right now? Well, as developers, we actually kill data all the time. And as an example, here's like a little function, and when you enter the function, it asks you something, and then it stores it in the post variable. And then when it leaves the function, that post variable is dead because it's ephemeral. And in a lot of cases, that's actually what you want. You want the data to disappear because you no longer need it. But sometimes you want it to kind of hold on a little bit longer. So in React, there's this concept of component tree. You need to find something to attach the data to so that it can survive. And so in React, you can use state for this. You can put some data into state, and then it will persist for as long as the component is mounted, right? So basically, you can do this. But what if the component gets unmounted? Well, then the data is dead again. And again, in a lot of cases, that's actually what you want. You want it to be ephemeral. But if it's something like a post, I maybe want it to persist a bit longer. So if you learn React, one of the kind of first things that you learn, first techniques that you learn in React is lift and state up. So it's this concept that you can take a piece of data. If you want to extend its lifetime, you just lift it up to something that lives a bit longer. So you lift it up to the parent component. And then if the child, it still propagates down the child components. But then if one of those child components disappears, then it's actually fine. The data is kept alive, and then if it mounts later, it still has access to this data. But of course, all of this happens inside a browser tab. And what happens if the user closes the browser? Well, the data is gone. Which is maybe fine if you want it to be ephemeral. But if you want, if it's like a draft of a blog post you're writing, you probably want it to persist across closing the tab. You also probably want it to be synchronized between different tabs. So you might want to lift it up again into an API like local storage. So if you lift it up to local storage, then it will persist across, closing the tab. And if the user closes the tab, then it's actually fine because they can open another tab and it's still going to be there. Of course, all of this happens inside of a computer. Computers get old, they break. So you don't want your blog post to disappear when your computer goes down. You might want to buy a couple of new computers, maybe in different form factors. And also, if it's something like a blog post or a social media post, you probably want to share it with your friends who also have different computers. So you somehow have to get this information on all of those computers. And so there are different ways to solve it, but the simplest way is just to get a server, right? And then we lift the state up from the computer to the server, and the server becomes the source of truth. And so that is kind of like terminal state in a way. That's kind of like where the story usually ends. Because a server is something you can run forever. It's just there, so it stores information. It kind of solves the problem. But you're still inside a product. So what happens if your product dies? Or what happens if the product changes in a super significant way? What happens to the user data? Again, it goes away or it becomes dead. And it's not really something you can fix if you think about it from the developer's perspective, because like when we're in this developer box, we're thinking, oh, like this, this database is like part of my job. Then I change jobs. I don't care anymore. Like what happens to it? But if you take off the developer hat and put on the user hat, it doesn't really make sense. And so I think you kind of need to step outside and think, like when I post something, what is the actual source of truth for what I'm posting? Like, is this some server? And I think it isn't. It's really the user is the source of truth. So if I post something, conceptually, it's really it's my post. Like when I post something on Twitter, it's not Twitter's my post. It's my Twitter post. And so the question is, what if we could lift state up one more time? So what if there was a layer kind of above the products that was user-controlled, that was product agnostic, and that was shaped like the web? And so this is, we call it the atmosphere, like at protocol atmosphere. It's kind of cute. So let's have a look at how this could work. So I have a little, so this is my Bluesky profile page, and I'm just going to make a little post. I hope that the internet works. Hello there from a live demo. Did it come through? Yeah, okay, yeah, fine, it came through. And so you can see, it's just like I'm just posting. But there's actually another way to look at this data. So let me expand this a little bit. So this is the Add Protocol browser. This is not something we built. It's something an open source contributor has built. It's like 70 lines of code. It uses our SDK. But this is a way to see what data is stored in the atmosphere. So let's go to add the Abramov. and see what's out there. So there's a few things going on here. One you see is that Dan Abramov is my kind of nice handle, my domain name handle. There's also a identifier that's persistent. So this I can change my domain later, so I'm not tied to this domain, but this is like my actual identity, but then it's hard to read. So you can think of this as my identity. And then there's a bunch of stuff here. So we'll look at this stuff a bit later. There's also a little bit of JSON that just represents who I am, like that represents what is at Dan Abramov. And so you can see that there's a field that says this is my kind of alias. So this is Dan Abramov is my handle. There's a key that says this is my public key, which is as a user, you probably don't care about this, but then this lets you verify that anything in this repository was actually signed by me and like written by me and not tampered with. And then the last thing that I want to point to here is that this is my service endpoint. And so this is where the data is actually stored. We can actually click on this, and it's just an HTTP server. I'm not gonna like actually hit its routes, but it's open source, so you can see source code. So this server is operated by Bluesky. So my data, like my hosting, is by Bluesky, the company. But because we provide a Docker container for this server, and it's also just TypeScript, so you could actually run it yourself. Also, it's a spec, so you could also implement it yourself if you want to against the spec. Okay, so let's have a look at the actual data. So you can see it's kind of separated into collections. If you use something like Firebase, I think it kind of feels similar. They're namespaced based on reverse domain. So bsky.app is our application domain. So it's in the reverse as app.bsky.post or like. So all the information that I create through Bluesky is actually in the atmosphere under these collections. And so if I go into post, and these are my post records, and this is the most recent one. Hello there from a live demo. Yay, it worked. And you can see if I post something again, it actually appears right here. And so this is my second post. So yeah, let's have a look at. So here is Haley's profile, and Haley also has a bunch of posts, so we can take a look at haleyok.com. Note that they're not actually hosted at haleyok.com. So domains, they just act as kind of user-readable aliases. The actual host is, again, it's specified here. And in this case, you can see that Haley actually hosts her own data on her own server. So she runs the Docker container that we distribute, and I'm talking to Haley's server now. And so we can see here are Haley's posts. Again, my information is in my repository, and then Haley's information is in Haley's repository. Yeah, so one thing you might notice here, if I go back to my profile here, is that not all of this stuff is related to Bluesky. So there's something called events.smokesignal.calendar.rsvp, and this is because there's another app that's built on Atmosphere and on AdProtocol, and I can actually log into that app. So let me log into with my username, which is just my domain, and so that's going to go to my hosting server. Is just OAuth flow, just like you can log in with Google. And this is kind of like meetup.com. I mean, it's a very rudimentary app. Somebody just built it a couple of weeks ago. But here's a tech talk that I want to attend. So I'm going to say that I'm going to this tech talk. So it says that, OK, I RSVP to it. And then if I go to Dan Abramov, Event Smoke Signal Calendar RSVP, here's a record. And so it says that I am going to this event, which is created by the author of whoever created this event. In this case, it's the @protocol dev community group. So let's do a little overview of what we've seen so far. So we have these repositories. You can change the domain name handle. You can change the actual place where they're hosted. And they hold collections of JSON. And the JSON is application specific. So we're not trying to do the galaxy brain of like universal formats although like you could put that there as well if you wanted to. But like Bluesky posts, the schema for those are defined by the Bluesky application. Smoke signal RSVP is defined by smoke signal. And it kind of reminds you of this relationship where the stuff that you host is really yours. You can change it, delete it, and there's like a way to prove that it actually was something that you put out there. Another interesting thing is that these things can kind of link to each other. So one record can link to another record using these @URIs. So we can see if I go to Haley's profile and I like Haley's post, I'm still writing to my repository. So we don't write to other people's repositories. I'm writing to my repository because the fact that I liked something is my data. And so if I go back to @Abramov, and I go to my collection of likes, my most recent like, it's a record of the type like, and then the thing that I liked is a record of type bsky.post by Haley. Oh, there's a video there. We don't show the video. Oh, it's a test video thread, so that's why it doesn't show up in the app yet. So these things can link to each other, and kind of like pages can link to each other on the web, except it's pieces of JSON. And of course, like things can be removed. Like we don't want social media to be immutable. We want it to be mutable. So links can go dead as well, and that is something the application has to deal with. And so we have this kind of interesting approach where the data is stored in these repositories that are hosted somewhere, but then we want to get them into our backend, right? We don't want to query different pieces of the web just to get some information down there. We want it to be cached, available on our backend. So how do we get this stuff on our backend? Because we want to produce this aggregated view over these over these inputs. And so we can look for inspiration again, like at the web. Is like have you ever used Google search? How does Google show information from different websites on a single page? Well, it just aggregates them. It crawls them, indexes them, and then that index is what's being consulted when you query something with Google. So we could do something similar. We could just have the records, and something was added, something was deleted, something was changed, aggregate that into our backend. Of course, if we have 6 million users, then there's going to be 6 million repositories. So you probably don't want to have your backend listen to 6 million WebSockets. So we actually, in order to aggregate all of this stuff, we actually run a node that aggregates and caches the content from the entire network. So it's actually not super expensive to run. If you wanted to run a similar node yourself with the current volume of the network, it would take like $150 a month. So it's not super expensive. But we run a node like this. It aggregates the content from the entire network. It caches it. And then your backend can just listen to it can crawl it. So you can actually like enumerate everything that's stored on the network. And you can also subscribe to by WebSocket to receive the event log of everything that's happening. And so there are some ways to scale it further. But for now, this is working pretty well with 500K daily users. And so from that point on, it's really a traditional client-server architecture. So we're not changing anything about how the client talks to the server. That is just normal web development. The only new part is really that there is another input into your backend. There's like your backend has a backend, and it's controlled by the user. Okay. let's recap, because that was a lot. So in the early web, we used to put this stuff, we had the direct connection to the stuff that we put out there. But we want to hang out together. We want to be in these social spaces. And so in order to feed that into the model of the web, we had to get inside the box. But products change, products die, products change in ways we don't expect. And we can download an archive of 100 megabytes, but that's just dead JSON. We can't really do anything meaningful with it collectively. And so what if instead there was a layer on top of the web that was product agnostic, that was user controlled, and that was shaped like the web, where we could put pieces of JSON with the types defined by applications. And so these pieces of JSON could link to each other just like pages can link to each other on the web. And then we would need some way to aggregate this stuff on the server. And so in order to scale it up, we could also add some kind of aggregation and caching. And because all the records are signed, you don't actually need to trust that the cache is not lying to you, because you can cryptographically verify that it was signed by the original person who owns the identity. And from that point on, it's just normal web development. So we know that this works because we actually have an app in production that is built this way. So it's the Bluesky app. But we're starting, so we just revamped our website to kind of, we published a tutorial for how to build apps on the Atmosphere. There's a couple of people already figured it out before we documented it, which is, I don't know how they figured it out, but this smoke signal site is like a way to kind of like meetup.com in very early stage. And then this front page .fyi is kind of like a Hacker News clone that's built on at Prado. So there are already apps that work this way. And what's interesting, and really the key part of it, is that all events go to all consumers. And it may take a little bit to process like the implications of this, but this is really the most interesting part. So when I create a Bluesky post, it goes to the relay, so this node that we run that caches and retransmits content. And then it goes to all the backends, all the application backends that are completely independent, have nothing to do with us, that care about this information. And even if they're not related to Bluesky. So for example, the Hacker News clone front page doesn't care about Bluesky posts, so it just ignores it. And then the Bluesky application actually cares about Bluesky posts, so it saves it into our database. And then Smoke Signal doesn't currently care about Bluesky posts. But one thing they could do is they could, for example, start listening to Bluesky post records that mention that have a link to an event, and then display these records as a comments section on the events page. And they don't need to query any API to do that, because it will just go into their database, and they can just query the database, that they run to do that. And so this really, if more products were built this way, it really changes the shape and the kind of like the kind of things you can do between products. So one thing you can do, for example, is you could build plugins to social apps. So for example, like Twitter had this plugins like unfollowing people who haven't posted in a while or something like this, and you needed Twitter's API access for this. But here, as long as the user grants access, that app can just write to those records. And so the Bluesky app will reactively update its database in response to those updates. So you can build plugins for apps. You can also bootstrap new apps on top of existing apps. So this like thing that Meta does with Threads, when Threads launched, Threads used the Instagram's follow graph in order to kind of bootstrap the network. And it's a great strategy for bootstrapping. And so what if it was just available to everyone? What if you didn't have to own a huge social network in order to bootstrap another product? And so, for example, you could build a dating app using Bluesky profiles as kind of the scaffolding. So if you log into it, maybe it uses your profile picture and bio. But maybe we don't use the follow graph there. And then you could store private information in your own database, but then maybe you would create your own types of records that all other apps could also interpret. So this really starts blurring the boundaries between apps, where some apps could display content from other apps as well. Like, for example, you could imagine, just like Instagram displays popular posts from threads, you could do the, like, if more apps were built this way, more apps could do the same thing, because for example, if somebody built an Instagram clone with at protocol, initially, you could just use, for example, the identity and maybe not even care about any of the Bluesky data and be completely separate. But then, for example, if it becomes popular, Bluesky could add a media tab that shows posts from that app in the Bluesky app. So this really kind of becomes this just like breaking the walls between apps, I think in a very dynamic and interesting way that ultimately is interesting from the user perspective. So if you want to learn more about the ad protocol, we just literally a few hours ago released the new version of our website. It has a tutorial. So you can learn about how to build kind of a sample app on the ad protocol. It's on GitHub. Give it a star. So that's on adproto.com. There's also a community-run website called adprotocol.dev, where there's going to be a series of tech talks. The first one was just like a week ago. The first one was attended by 15 people. Maybe the next ones will be attended by more people. But if you're interested in this kind of stuff, this is one of the gateways into the community. And then go Bluesky app /@proto if you want to just like learn more about, from people posting who are building at protocol and building on at protocol. You can sign up on Bluesky with this link, and it will actually give you a list of people to follow who are posting about at protocol, among other things. So go Bluesky app /@proto. There's a lot that I'm not going to cover today. It doesn't mean that we haven't thought about it. Again, this is in production, so all of these things are really important, and we do have answers for all of them. If you want to, you can check out the GitHub discussions for @proto and ask some of them there. And so, to conclude, is this the future of building for the web? I don't know. Maybe not. Right, because the Bluesky, the company, can die. Bluesky, the product, can die, and that's usually how these things happen, right? They're not permanent. But the interesting part is that, in a way, it kind of doesn't matter, because I can just put my stuff on my own hosting or on some free hosting or somewhere else. It's just a server that returns some JSON. It's open source, so I could still run my own server if I wanted to, or somebody could run it for me if there's enough people who are interested in doing this type of thing. And then, of course, if if Bluesky goes away, our relay goes down. But then, if there are people who want to build applications using the ad protocol and using this approach, somebody else can get the relay running, because the relay is also open source. And somebody just needs to run that code. It's more expensive to run it than to run the repository, just because it's consumed by many apps. But presumably, there's some incentive for somebody, just like we have the incentive to run it ourselves. Somebody will have the incentive to run as well if they're operating some kind of a product that has some runway. And the funny thing is, like, somebody can just resurrect Bluesky, actually, because if the data is still in the atmosphere, and actually, like, our code is open source, you can just make the product rise from the ashes again and crawl the data again into the database, and then it works like before. So somebody else can even bring it back from the dead or make a different product that's built on that data if they want to. And so the thing is, like, maybe maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it doesn't work out, and maybe the product dies or the company dies, but you can't really kill an idea. And so, even if like we don't finish it, maybe somebody else will finish it. And in general, life finds a way. Thank you.